You're listening to Vedge Your Best. There has never been a more important time to be vegan. At Vedge Your Best, I want to help you. I want to help you limit and eliminate the consumption of animal products without feeling deprived, overwhelmed, or unsupported, even if no one you know is vegan. My name's Michelle Olander. I'm a life coach, and I know that if I could go vegan in my 50s, with all my excuses, I know you can start moving in that direction too. Vedge Your Best, and there's nothing you can't do. Episode 189, The Taxes of Being Vegan. Welcome back. Welcome back. And if you're a new listener, if you found Vedge Your Best recently, welcome. I am also welcoming myself back to New England. I just got back to Massachusetts after 3 full months in Florida, where we welcomed our newest grandchild, our first granddaughter. And we had a chance to play and spend time with her almost 2-year-old brother for the 3 months. And then last week, our other children and their children came down to meet the new baby and spend Easter together. And there were 5 grandchildren, age 3 and under, which I'm sure some of you have much bigger families, but I thought that was a lot of very little kids. And I was telling my adult children that I think the time in life that they are in now with small kids and babies, getting careers going, figuring out where to live, how to try and set up where they live so that it's safe and functional and hopefully pleasant. I was telling them that I thought this was probably the hardest time in their lives because there are so many pressing concerns throughout the day, so many, and yet exhausted and overwhelmed. You still know that no matter how taxed you are by the process, there are people who envy your problems. And speaking of taxes, in the U.S., this is it. This is the deadline for income taxes. And in Canada, maybe that's coming up a little bit later. Maybe you remember my husband and kids and sister-in-law, lots of Canadian citizens. In Canada, I think you've got a couple more weeks and to file your tax returns. And in the UK, I know it's been explained to me how you do it, but I don't get it. So I'm not going to add to the confusion. Australia, I think you've got loads of time still, right? October, something like that. But I'm not a tax professional. So please do not use this preamble to today's podcast episode as any sort of tax advice. But it's tax season. And on my calendar this year, I had a note about taxes. And if you're not using your calendars to make notes to yourself in the future, to connect with future you're missing a very fun thing. Your calendar. I use the iPhone calendar. Your calendar is not just for dental cleanings and birthdays and appointments. You can put anything in there, anything, and you can share it with anyone. And yes, I still really need a large format physical paper calendar for some long range planning, but the calendar on your phone is amazing for so many reasons. And I still run into people all the time who really don't use it. So you can put anything in your phone on the calendar and have it remind you at any time. And last year at tax season, I was reading a post from the writer Ryan Holiday. He wrote a post about taxes, and I put it into my phone to read this tax season. Now, if you've been with me from the beginning, or you've dipped into the deep tracks of my back catalog, you may know that the Stoics have been a huge influence on my personal philosophy and my problem-solving philosophy. And Ryan Holiday is one of those kind of young Stoic influencers who over the past decade or two has shared how that ancient philosophy has relevance for him in his real life. So last year at tax time, I saved a piece Ryan Holiday had shared about the taxes of life. And I saved it on my calendar to pop up in April 2024 for my tax preparation. Now, you may not know, especially if you're new here, you may not know that I've always loved the Stoics since I first read about them because they are so practical. And well, at least I've always found them to be concerned with how we live today in a real world the best way we can. And the Stoics always remind us that there are always other people who actually envy our problems. And taxes, they're not new. They've been part of life for over 2,000 years. Taxes are in the Bible. They have been a more or less continual source of stress and irritation and feelings of unfairness for a long time. And for me personally, the stress in tax season is always about collecting and retrieving and finding all the documentation and doing it correctly because my husband and I have been self-employed for over 40 years, and that's a lot of pieces of paper. So in the article that I saved, let's get back to that. In the article I saved on my calendar to reread this tax season, Ryan Holiday writes about the advice that the Stoic philosopher Seneca has in one of his letters to Lucilius about the inevitability of taxes. All the things, writes Seneca, all the things which cause complaint or dread are like the taxes of life, things from which, my dear Lucilius, you should never hope for exemption or to seek escape. Pay these taxes of life gladly. Not just the taxes, not just those taxes from the government. As Ryan Holiday writes, annoying people are a tax on being outside of your house. Delay, that's a tax on travel. Haters are a tax on having a YouTube channel or a podcast or an Instagram post. There's a tax on everything in life, says Ryan Holiday. You can whine or you can pay the taxes gladly. And so, as I said in the beginning, my kids right now are at the season of their lives where they all have their own very small children who require constant attention. And that exhaustion is one of those taxes of life on the wealth of having active, healthy toddlers and babies. That's one way of looking at it, right? And the Stoic point of view is that we should always continue to remind ourselves to be grateful, even if it's not our default. Because taxes, whether they are levied on your income or on the purchases in your shopping cart or on your car by the government, or whether they're the metaphorical taxes on your time and your patience and your energy, these taxes of life are impossible without wealth and life. Where do we want to place our focus? That we owe something, or that we're fortunate enough to own something that can be taxed? Do we focus on the demands of our screaming toddlers who won't sleep or eat, or do we refocus on the opportunity we have to care for these babies? Now, taxes are, I would say, inevitable for almost all of us. We can vote about those rates and we can vote about who pays what. We can dispute what the government charges us. We can do our best to demand that those dollars be spent wisely, and that there's oversight. And still, as wise as all those options can be to demand some fairness in the tax structure, still most of us will have almost no control over the amount and the calculation and the timing of those taxes. And the irritations, And there are costs. There are costs associated with the different experiences of being alive. And tax season is maybe an opportunity to notice the things that really get under our skin and distract us from the privileges that we do have. There's a vegan meme on Instagram that I love. It's a pie chart. I'll put a link to it, and maybe I'll put it up on Instagram. But it's a pie chart. Just imagine a circle showing, the title of it is The Hardest Part of Being Vegan. And on the circle, the pie chart, the percentages are assigned to the different categories of what people say is the hardest part of being vegan. And let's see, I think there's 6 categories. And the slices of the pie show little slices, maybe 3% of the pie, saying the hardest part of being vegan is, okay, 3% says eating in restaurants. And then there's another little slice, 3%, eating at friends' houses. Then another 3% respond that getting enough vitamins is the hardest part of being vegan. And another 3% identifies finding vegan products to be the hardest part of being vegan. But the overwhelming majority of the pie chart, the biggest part of the pie, is labeled dealing with idiots. These are some of the taxes of a vegan life, right? And maybe your categories will be a little different. And if you are a brand new vegan, just starting out on a plant-based practice, your categories, the hardest part of being vegan, will represent where you are and what's challenging right now for you. But maybe those challenges are just part of the taxes of vegan life. Now, for example, dealing with idiots. Okay, that's not a big tax in my life. Yes, there are loads of people who don't agree with me, who push back, who think I'm misguided, who continue to think I eat fish and remind me that I'm not getting enough protein. But somebody's always had a problem with something about me for my whole life, right? On any other, on many other topics, long before I ever went vegan. But when I was a new vegan, what other people said or did was more taxing, if you will, on my energy and my resolve, my patience. And it's not that those people disappeared, just I don't really focus on them very much at all anymore. It's almost like 7% sales tax on purchases. It's not that I like it. I don't. But there's really nothing to be done about it, especially day to day. I can decide that I can't pay for something or won't pay for something, or I do pay for it, and I try not to let it ruin my day. And yes, moving towards a vegan, plant-based, more compassionate lifestyle, it involves recognizing and accepting certain costs or inconveniences. Just as taxes are an unavoidable part of financial life, the impact of our actions are taxes we ourselves levy on animals, many of whom are in horrific conditions. It's a tax we level on the environment through the degradation of soil and water usage and pollution. And it's a tax we levy on our health, in our families, in our communities. These are areas where we humans are taxing the world around us. Now, becoming vegan, sure, it may require relinquishing familiar foods, adjusting some of your social norms, and sometimes facing criticism or comment or inconvenience. But when we focus on the negative aspects and challenges of veganism, that just leads to frustration, resentment. But how about we zoom out a bit? How about we zoom out a bit and consider the broader picture, the positive impact of veganism on animal welfare, the positive impact of veganism and plant-based choices on environmental sustainability and our personal health, our health as a country, as well as the privilege many, many more of us have these days to make more and more vegan choices. Now, that's a privilege not everyone has. There are people who would love your problems. My dad used to say that all the time, and I've mentioned him before. He was a homeless, stateless, often hungry small child refugee in the Second World War. He escaped with his mother from Poland as a 6-year-old. They escaped through Romania, Italy, France, Spain, then Portugal, and finally the UK, where he grew up and became a physician before immigrating to the US in 1956. And he always would say it. There are people who would love your problems. Just as taxes are a reflection of wealth and contribute to societal infrastructure, veganism can reflect a consciousness of one's impact on the world and a commitment to ethical living. Rather than dwelling on what we've lost in terms of familiar foods or social norms, maybe we can try to keep intentionally focusing on the abundance of what's available to us and the opportunity we have right now to contribute to changes we'd like to see. Because yes, our choices, our personal choices can be very taxing on the environment and the beings we share this world with. What you're doing matters. It really, really matters. You've got a lot going on. I know you're fully booked. I know the taxes of life are not a joke. And they're also not going away. So let's think about how to always bring our attention back to the abundance that we have rather than what we're missing. I know it's not always easy. But in the meantime, till next week, you know the drill, right? Vedge your best.
Vedge Your Best podcast production, music, and editing by Charlie Weinshank. Thanks, Charlie. Before you go, it would mean so much to me and the Vedge Your Best team if you would hit subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, or share with someone you think might be interested. Something about algorithms, it helps bump us up a little in the rankings, and that's the best way to help others find the podcast and for us to find our audience. So, until next week, make it easy and veg your best.